This segment is brought to you by JigMasters Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to JigMasters.com and use promo code PNF20 and save 20% off your next jig order today.
Welcome to the Paddle and Fin podcast, the Bass Fishing for Noobs segment, where we try to improve our skills as an angler by learning new techniques or improving the ones we already know. I'm your host, Ryan Milford. Welcome back to the Paddle and Fin podcast. This is the Bass Fishing for Noobs segment. I'm your host, Ryan. We got the co-host, Sean. How you doing,
guys?
bud?
Doing great.
We've been wanting to do a episode talking about fish finders for a while, and we figured we want to go in depth and really talk about it. I know there's several people out there that don't have one, that know nothing about them, that want to get one but have no idea what to get. Got people like me that just recently got theirs and have no clue how to work it, and even people that are a little more advanced but want to know more about it. So we figured we needed to bring in a geek on this one. So we got none other than the returning guest, Hank Rogers, aka BassGeek. Welcome back to the show, buddy.
Hey man, thanks for having me. I had a great time the last time I was on. Really enjoyed it. Love to do this sort of thing and hang out with you guys. And you're really talking about a subject that is, I love graphs. I mean, I love them. They have changed the way I fished from the time that I had my John boat when I had a flasher and then went to a little grayscale eagle. I've been using graphs to find offshore fish and structure for a very, very long time. So
just the man for the job tonight, huh?
Well, and then it's kind of like I told you, when we were texting, I'm actually a network engineer. So, my job is technology. And, so I probably have a little bit better understanding of, what those megahertz and kilohertz and cone angles and the science kind of behind
all the stuff that I don't have a clue with.
Yeah, and don't feel alone. There's a lot of guys that don't. But the thing I want to tell you tonight is that you don't really have to know all of that scientific terminology, to really get started and to be pretty, efficient with your graphs.
Cool. Sweet. Well, let's jump in here. So, myself is just, I guess you could say, just the sonar. I don't have the side imaging and down imaging and all that. So, how would you explain the sonar? Are there different types of it between the different brands or different price ranges or?
Well, when you're talking about 2D sonar, it's not so much that there's different types. There's different frequencies and there's different, I'll call it frequency bonding. Okay. So not really a difference, everything is pretty much standardized with sonar, 2D sonar. The biggest thing I can tell you and the biggest improvement that I can tell you, that if you want to go with just strictly a 2D graph, is chirp is probably the biggest improvement. And the difference between a regular 2D imaging, 2D sonar, is the most common frequencies. And I can't believe this, I'm having a brain fart, but I think it's like 55-200 right now, or 80-200. Yeah, 55. That's old school. so 8200. And the thing you have to remember about that is that basically number one is cone difference. And so let's see if I can remember exactly how this goes, because I get them confused with down imaging and sonar. If I remember correctly, one of them basically is a 1-to-1. And not to get too far ahead of that, but what that means is 1 foot down equals a 1 foot cone distance. The other is a 3-to-1. So 3 foot down equals, 1 foot. So basically how it works with frequency is on the 2D side is the lower the number, the deeper the water penetration. So, the more you're going to be able to see, the deeper versus, and again, that might be reversed. Forgive me. I'm having a brain fart right now. But the difference between standard sonar and chirp is that you, instead of imagine painting this wall behind me with a fine point Sharpie. Okay. Or that's old school regular 2D sonar. Chirp is like taking a range. So you can take, instead of it being the 200, it may be 150 to 250. So it's using that entire range, every single one of those frequencies, 100 frequencies. So it's like taking a paint roller and painting this wall. So you get, as that bounces off the bottom and off fish, you get a more defined picture of the bottom. So, chirp almost on the newer sonars, GPS sonars, pretty much is a standard thing now for most of them. Now they'll still sell some of the lower end without it, but
can I pause you real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I believe mine is chirp, but with your saying with like the old school. Now before this one, all I've ever messed with was like the really old school ones that got the little fish that come across the screen. Is that what you're referring to as like the old school, or is it something else?
Well, the old school, and what I mean by that is just the frequencies. So you're talking the difference between a single frequency and 100 frequencies.
Okay.
So old school, which ain't really old school, it's just the difference between standard sonar and chirp sonar. So standard sonar is a single frequency, and chirp sonar is like broadband. So standard sonar would be like dial up versus, broadband, fiber. And so you just get such a broad range, using 100 frequencies, versus just that single frequency. And so that's what I'm referring to. Now, what you're talking about is actually what they call fish view or image, or different, companies call it a different thing. And a lot of people give me flack because I always tell them, I'm like, listen, the worst thing you can do is cut that stupid fish image on, because it's going to tell you that a leaf in 15 foot that's floating is a fish. It's going to tell you half of that brush pile is a fish.
I was going to say that all the times that I did use those, there never seemed to actually be a fish there where it said there was.
Yeah. But you need to learn, the difference between arches and what fish really are. I'm a huge proponent of us weekend warriors having the best graphs we can buy. I think it helps us more than it helps the pros, because we get to fish once or twice a week, maybe. So having that, learning that, being able to interpret that graph is going to cut your time down so much between searching, finding, and catching. And to me, that's why I'm a huge proponent of buying the most graph you can afford, because it really does help you catch more fish than I think anything out there you can do. I mean, 100%.
All right. So we talked a little bit about regular sonar. So then we'll move on to like side imaging and down imaging. How would you explain the difference between sonar and that?
So sonar is like standard def television compared to side imaging and down imaging. Okay. So it's, it's old standard TV, with, I don't know how many of you guys remember, you'd have to get up and change the knobs, and, the tube TVs that weighed like 400 pounds.
Yeah, I'm not that young, man. I used to have a floor model back in the day.
Yeah. So that's kind of the difference between sonar and down imaging. So down imaging, originally came out and it was 400. Again, we go back to frequencies, 455. And so again, we're talking one frequency, either the, like I said, 50, 80, 200 on the 2D sonar, and then you had the 455. Now 455, as you get greater in the side and down imaging, it restricts your the amount of water penetration. So 455, you're going to be able to see, hundreds of feet most of the time. 800, you're going to be able to see, I think its maximum range is like 200 feet. And then now, Humminbirds come out with Mega, and Mega is, somewhere around about 128 or so, they say. It's not quite that good that far, and again, a lot of what they say, you've always got to remember, these companies are telling you in the perfect situation, that you're going to see that stuff at. So when you see a brush pile on a 2D standard sonar, you're seeing this just colors and just this wad of, color. When you see it on down imaging, you see the limbs. Even at 455, which has the least amount of definition, you're seeing the limbs. You can still somewhat differentiate fish inside the brush pile. You can really see what and know, is it grass? Is it a Christmas tree somebody sunk? Is it a mannequin? Is there a car down there? Is that a bridge? You can really get the definition. With 2D, to a certain extent, you still have to kind of guess, what is that? Is it a rock pile? Is it a thick brush pile? With 2D or with down imaging, you really get the full picture. Now we go to side imaging, and a lot of people, and I'll be one of the ones. I'm with Humminbird now, and I'm not sponsored by any of these companies, so I can tell you exactly what I think about all of them. I was with Lowrance, and Lowrance has always had an edge in the down imaging. Humminbird has caught up tremendously since the Mega, but Humminbird has always had a pretty big edge on the side imaging. And for the longest of time, I never really understood, kind of the impact of having quality side imaging. And the thing about quality side imaging, and people ask me constantly, can you see fish on side imaging? Absolutely, you can see fish. Originally, in its early days, it was better to find structure, find rock piles, find hard bottom, soft bottom, a log. But now you can see the fish out there a lot of times. We still use it to find structure, but this is what goes back to me saying it's so important for us weekend warriors to have good graphs, is because now we, when down imaging was kind of the deal and sonar was the deal, if you're graphing a place that's maybe a little deeper, you'd have to zigzag and crosshatch. You don't have to do that anymore. You can set it to see 50, 60, 150 feet, 200 feet out, depending on the contour of the bottom. And you can make one pass and go, nothing there, next. And so it eliminates so much area and water so fast, and you can put yourself on fish so much quicker. And that's why I say it's so much more important to us guys that are only fishing 1 or 2 days a week, because we all know, especially this time of year, I've always made the joke in the spring, what you caught those fish doing yesterday won't happen until that time next year. They've done changed. They're moving up and down. That pattern is over, So that's why I say it's so important to have good electronics, and even on kayaks, because on kayaks, yeah, you may not be eliminating the scale of water that I'm eliminating in a bass boat, but you are really picking apart these areas that you're fishing. And so for you to sit there and get detailed images and spend the time that you're spending fishing this stuff, because it's like I've always said, and I told you the last time I was on, if I pull up in a pocket and I see a kayaker in there, I'm gone, because I know he's picked apart every daggone thing in there. I mean, I know he's took his time, and for me, there's nothing left. I'm going on.
Well, with as far as the transducer goes, what's the correct position to mount it in, and does that change whether it's like a regular sonar transducer or like a side imaging and down imaging transducer?
It does. The good thing about a 2D sonar, if you've only got 2D or standard sonar, most of the time you can shoot those through hull. Unfortunately, side and down imaging doesn't work through hull, so those have to be exposed. And the biggest key to a side and down imaging, so if you I know Lowrance has a 3-in-1, Humminbird has a 3-in-1, Garmin now has a 3-in-1, so you get all three downside sonar in one. Now those are going to have to be exposed, and the biggest thing about those is you just want to make sure that everything is clear to the left and the right, and that you're getting good clean water across that sonar or that transducer. And what I mean by that is you don't want to have anything that's causing turbulence in front of it, because a lot of times what can happen is those bubbles can come across the face of that transducer, and it causes you to have clutter or interference, so to speak, and you won't get the best picture quality. Now on most kayaks, I mean, you've got some sort of flat area or some sort of removable, center console. Forgive my lack of terminology there, but you've got some sort of area that's most of your kayaks that's now made for transducer mounting. And if you've got the 3-in-1, the down and the side imaging, you just need to make sure that there's nothing that's going to block that side beam, and that you're getting good clean water on them, and you're just fine. You can mount them anywhere you want.
Well, as far as like say mine, where it's just the 2D, like should mine be flat, like where it's got the little sensors over here, be flat or pointing down, or how should that be aimed?
Now, do you have a skimmer? Tell me what yours looks like. Does it look like kind of a little triangle, or is it a circle?
It's not a circle. I guess more of like a triangle shape.
So you've got a skimmer. Now, skimmer, that by default, they're designed to be put on the transom of a boat somewhere. But with a 2D sonar, now the great thing about a 2D sonar, you really don't have to worry about it. If it's just a sonar, you don't even have, there's no backward to it either because the beam is round. So yeah, you want it to be as level with the water as you can get it. But there's also some tricks. Now on a bass boat, this is a little more important. On a kayak, probably don't want to do this. But you know, like if you want to get it to read at speed a little better, sometimes you can kind of tilt it back just a little bit so the beam is shooting slightly out in front of you. So as you're going across it, that beam comes back and you can get a little more, you can get a little bit clearer picture at speed, you know, when you're up on plane. Now at a kayak, I mean, unless y'all are strapping a 5 horsepower to it or something, you know, or maybe one of the Bixby's or the new, oh gosh, the new.
There's a lot of people putting those spot locks with
yes,
the motor
Old
guide.
Town, yeah.
Old Treks, yes, the new Old Treks, the Old Towns, yes, those are super nice.
But I was wondering like how it shoot. That's part of the reason I asked about what angle it should be at, because I'm curious about how it shoots, whether what I'm seeing is below me or in front of me, or how exactly that works.
Well, on a 2D sonar, you're definitely seeing what's below you. Now you got to remember, like I said, I'm again the 200, I believe. And guys, I might be saying this completely backwards, so look it up. I can't. I always get them mixed up. The down inside is a little different. The higher you go up, the more narrow the beam is, and I think the lower you go down, the more narrow the beam is on the 2D sonar. But I believe that I'm going to say the 80 is a 1-to-1. Now, again, it's a cone. So you can take a piece of paper and rig it up kind of like a megaphone, and that's going to be over you. So if you're over 3 foot of water, you're going to see a circle on the bottom that is 3 foot across. Okay. Now, if you're, like I said, I believe on the 200, it's 1-to-3. So if you're in 3 foot of water, you're only going to see a foot circle.
Okay.
So yeah, it's going to be straight down. Now here's the difference, and I tell people all the time because I don't run down imaging on the front of my boat. And a lot of people ask me why I don't, and the reason why is cone shape. So with 2D sonar, it works great on a trolling motor, you know, and the reason why is because the cone is a circle. So it doesn't matter that trolling motor can spin around all day. And it's not going to affect your image. But down inside imaging, it's really not a cone at all. It's actually more of a thin line. So, you know, if you hold your arms out to the side and your head, look at me, I'm knocking over the lamps over and you move, you know, that it distorts the edges of the image.
Yeah.
Because so it's more like a credit card. So if you take that credit card and you spin it around, it's going to distort and blur the edges. And side imaging is the same way. You know, if I'm turning the boat, you know, you'll notice that everything kind of gets on, you know, if I'm taking a left, everything kind of gets drug out on the right side, and on the left side, it all gets compressed together, and you'll get this one little area that's still kind of okay. So, you know, that's, again, that's kind of the difference between the sonars and the 2D and side image and down image. And it's cone shape matters too.
Okay. Real quick on that, like, so how do you approach, if that's showing you below you, how do you approach that? Do you move off that spot and like turn around and throw at it? Or...
Yeah, absolutely. That's where your waypoints and your map comes in. So I love deep fishing. Okay. So I during the winter time, I am doing what they call the Mickey rig. And for any of you guys out there, sorry, I'm going to shameless plug myself here. For any of you guys out there that don't know, my name's BassGeek, and I run a YouTube channel called BassGeek. My name's Hank Rogers, but my channel's called BassGeek, and everybody calls me BassGeek. So, but the thing of it is so when I'm, out there looking for those big smallmouth, and I know they're out there 30, 40, 50. This past year I was fishing for them in 80 foot of water. And so you go across and you see them, you see the shad, and you'll see them directly under you. And then you just I just drop a waypoint back up and make, kind of line up with it and make those casts toward that waypoint. Now there is a little bit of a caveat to that, and one thing, even in a kayak, that you probably do want to look into. Lawrence calls it the 0.1 puck. Humminbird just calls it like a compass GPS antenna. I don't know what Garmin calls it, but basically what that does is, how you've got your little boat icon on your map, on your graph. Well, if you don't have that compass, so it tells you where north is all the time, if your boat's being blown sideways, even though it's pointing, let's say it's being blown east to west, even though you're pointing north and south, well, that screen turns this way, turns, east to west, and it shows your boat now is actually pointed in the wrong direction. So that compass in that puck actually will keep your map oriented correctly, because I don't use my maps on north up all the time, because I want to know that my boat is pointed at my target area, at my waypoint. So what I do is right up front, right beside my trolling motor, because that's where it's most important. Once I cross them, I hit that waypoint, I come up, and that waypoint transfers to me. For you guys, you'll most of the time only have one graph on your boat, unless you've got a really big kayak, one that I have not seen. So it's a cool prototype. I can't wait to see that unveiled. But,
hey, there's some pretty big ones out there.
Yes, there is some big ones out there. But so once you hit that waypoint, it's very important, number one, to zoom all the way in, because that waypoint itself, if you're zoomed way out, can be 100-foot circle. So you want to zoom all the way in, and then you want to pull up on that and make sure you're pointed in the right direction. And if you're getting blown around and you have your map on heads up, you want it on heads up display, not north up. That way you're pointed toward that waypoint, so that you're making the right cast. Now I'll be the first to tell you, when you're learning, go buy you some buoys. I'll also tell you, go buy you some buoys even if you do use your GPS, because GPS, based on cloud cover, based on I fish in Northeast Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, and the mountains are high and block a lot of stuff, and I can go over a spot, and if it's cloudy and I'm not getting a lot of satellite signal, it will actually cause my path or my waypoint to move up to 20 feet. So GPS is great, but my suggestion is keep 2 buoys in your boat somewhere. And the first buoy is, when you go across them, don't drop it right on them. Keep going until you don't see fish. Drop that buoy. Drop the waypoint right on the fish, then drop the buoy after you stop seeing fish. Come back around, because angles are everything. So, make casts from different angles on that waypoint. And then once you get bit, drop that other buoy, because now you've got the right lineup. They like that bait coming that direction. So that's what you to me, getting started, it's hard. I can tell you how to triangulate because I'm old as dirt, but why do it when you can throw a couple of cheap buoys in the boat and have actual markers to where you can line back up on them. So.
And that puck, how does that connect to the unit?
Most of the time, it'll literally connect directly to the unit, or some units will have a Y cable that will connect to it. But most of them, it'll just connect directly to the unit. So it's not a big deal. And I don't think, for the most part, I don't think they're that expensive either. Maybe I'll say from that $50 to $100 range, I think.
And then if your unit has GPS, that kind of negates the need for that, or you're saying it
actually
in addition to that. Okay.
Yeah, in addition to that, because you've got GPS in your unit, and the GPS in your unit is real good, but it doesn't have a compass, so it can't tell you true when you're true north.
Gotcha.
So, if you plan on doing a lot of, deeper summer, winter, type of fishing, it really becomes I have to have, because let me tell you, I've done it without it, and when that whole map spins around and shows you going, the backwards, you're like, what in the world am I going to do here? So, yeah, it's not fun, and it's confusing.
Definitely. I've had a bunch of times where I've ran over fish and then I've tried to turn around and I never end up pointing the right way, or know how far behind me it was by the time I make my turn.
Yeah.
So
and so the great thing about most graphs, when they'll have some, like the Humminbird, I'm not sure, the Lowrance puts a ring around your boat. So you can put that ring like 30, 40, 50 feet out. So once the edge of that ring touches that waypoint, you kind of know how far it is. Humminbird puts what they call cast rings around the actual waypoint. So what I like to do a lot of times is put it out to like, 40 feet. That way I know if I get to the edge of that ring, that for me to make a cast, because you don't want to drop the bait right on their heads most of the time if you're making casts. Now, wintertime, you want to drop it right on their head, so you don't care about the cast ring. But what you want to do is cast, if you've got a school, you want to cast past them, let that bait hit the bottom and drag it through the entire school. So, what I'll do is I'll know that from one edge of the cast ring to the waypoint itself is, 30, 40, 50 feet, and all the way to the other side. So I know I can probably make, if it's 60 feet, a 30-yard cast pretty easy. So
it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I love this stuff, man. I'm sorry.
Hey, no.
I mean, it's, I love my graphs, man.
That's awesome. How about screen size? What are your feelings on screen size and the importance of it? I tell you, I have a 5 only because that was what was affordable for me. But and kayaks, you're not. I've seen people with huge screens on their kayaks, but generally they're on the smaller size.
Well, this is the one thing where I tell guys that some of us are going to be disappointed, because this is where size matters. And it's just so, if you're a shallow water guy, if you're fishing shallow all the time, and when I say shallow, I mean, for me, 10 foot or less, 5 foot or less, it's probably not going to matter to you that much. I mean, if you just don't want to really, find those fish in different locales, it's probably not going to matter to you a whole lot. Because you're going to be looking for structure more than anything. Now, once you get into that, and really that's kind of a lie, because now with the Mega, it really does change everything. But, see, now I'm arguing with myself in my own head. But so screen size for me, I can put it to you like this. I had 9s a couple years ago, and I was really having a hard time on my down imaging seeing these fish in 40 and 50 feet, you know, because pixels, you know, imagine if you're 10 foot deep and you see a fish, and then stretch that screen to 50 foot deep, how tiny that fish is going to be. So, you know, I'm not saying you guys are going to fish, you know, a lot of, you know, 50 foot areas, but that still equates at 20 feet and even more on side imaging. You know, once you put side imaging in and you're looking 75 feet out, now, you know, now you're really missing a lot of what's there. And I can even talk to the 360. You know, now I don't have the Mega 360, and I know it's a lot better than the Gen 1 360. But, you know, the 360 there, I can tell you, and I tell guys all the time, they're like, man, I'm going to get a 360. Well, you got to imagine how much screen size you're going to need, because you're seeing 360 at 80 foot out. Imagine that on a 9-inch screen or a 7-inch screen. You ain't going to see nothing.
Right. The fish are going to be so tiny.
Yeah. And then imagine trying to split screen that with a map or a sonar. You just wasted $1,000. You know, you literally, and you know, again, I hate to tell people this, but I learned because I've got a $1,000 360 on the front of my boat, and it's really useless to me unless I just use it on my 10-inch screen and nothing else. Because you can't, if you split it with a down image or side or sonar, you lose so much of your picture clarity. You know, it just starts to bunch everything together. So you almost have to run that sort of unit, a 10 or 12 just dedicated for it, which is insane, I know. But, you know, how much do you want to know? I mean, that's the question. And that's the question that sonar answers. How much do you want to know? Even in the shallow stuff, Mega right now, you know, the smallmouth where I live at and the largemouth too are starting to bed. One of the things that I love to do this time of year is go down those banks, put it on my Mega, really tweak the clarity in, and just have that side, either the left or the right, and really be able to see those fish in 0 to 10 feet, or those beds in 0 to 10 feet, and see where they're at. And there's a lot of guys that just either don't know how to do that, or, you know, they buy these big, nice graphs and they just won't do it. They won't learn. You get stuck into the old habits, you know. So, but graphs will make you better all times of the year. You know, you're able to see bait fish. You're able to see, you know, I was fishing in the fall and went up in an area looking for bait fish, and I knew there's a road bed in there, and I knew active water coming in, and I knew that the bait generally congregated up there. They hadn't made it back to that area. Well, I was just making a left to leave. Well, you know, I didn't have to 2D sonar that entire, which was still, you know, maybe 50 yards wide, that entire area. I just made one pass, was looking on my 2D to see if I could find shad. Well, as I was like, well, there ain't no shad in here. I turned around, and all of a sudden there's a log with a bunch of dots around it. Well, I picked up a rock crawler, made 3 casts. It wasn't bass, but I caught my first ever perch, and I was pretty happy with that. So, you know, and that was just a total accident. And you'll get that so much, you know, when you see something and you go, oh, look at that. Let me mark that, or let me remember that, or let me, you know, that's interesting. Look at those fish over there. I would have never guessed. It just makes you better. My buddy in South Carolina, he was fishing a tournament just this year, and you know, I forget what he was fishing. He was fishing a crankbait, and he was fishing it on points. And you know, he goes over this one point, and you know, they ain't putting anything in the boat. And just so happens as he goes over this point, I was the one that talked him into updating his graphs. He goes over a point, there's a wad of fish. He spins around, he throws a jig out there, catches a couple of small ones. His buddy throws a Ned rig, catches a couple of big ones, and they sit there and stroke them and end up with a second place finish just because he accidentally found a wad of fish on the side imaging that he had never knew was there out in deeper water. It's, you know, it makes you better. I mean, it just does, even when you ain't trying.
So what about speed? As you mentioned earlier, y'all in the big boats are going to cover a lot more area because you're going to be moving faster. Us, we're kind of slow. So how much is that going to affect the reading as you're going along?
Well, you know, not as much as you think. I mean, you can get a pretty good reading at about 2 miles an hour. And I know you guys on a kayak, I mean, y'all can pedal and you know, paddle pretty, you know, much quicker than that. And that really only goes for, it's more with side imaging than it is with down imaging, and really doesn't matter at all with sonar.
Okay.
You know, sonar, again, it's why for the most part on the front, I don't use down imaging, is because sonar, down imaging and side imaging are my search tools, you know, for the most part. Now down imaging, you can use it, but again, it's going to kind of blur everything. So, you know, when you're setting still, and it's going to be that way with sonar too. You know, everybody talks about the arches with sonar, but if you're holding in place, they're lines, they're not arches. And it's kind of the same thing. We talk about dots when we talk about side imaging and down imaging. Even when you're moving on down imaging and side imaging, sometimes it can blur based on the direction of the fish. Are they coming head on, going head on, or are they pointed at you from the side? You know, are they north and south? Are they east and west as it pertains to your boat, you know, heading north and south? If they're, you know, a lot of times if they're north and south and they're moving with you, even on the side, you know, they can present as a line instead of as a dot. In the same way with 2D, if they're moving through the cone, it'll be an arch. If they're moving with it, there'll be a line. If you're setting still and they're setting in the cone, it'll be a line. So it won't be an arch.
I guess that makes it tough to tell size too, if it's a line versus an arch.
It does. I mean, for the most part, you can tell better I think on 2D because of the way your colors are set up. So, you know, the more dependent on the color, the colors that you like to use, you know, that harder color will show up more in the center of that fish than it will, you know, bigger dots. Yeah, sure. But like I said, if there's a lot of times on the down imaging with those bigger dots, if I'm using, like if I'm really looking for fish on structure, not in cover, generally I'm going to use my 455 on down imaging, and it makes those dots pop more because it's a stronger signal as opposed to, so sometimes you can get dots simply because it's stronger signal, but they're small fish in shallow water. But when you're sitting still, you can tell a little better with 2D, even if it's a line, how thick that line is a lot of times. So,
okay. And I know on side imaging, sometimes you can see shadows, and you can go by the shadows too for size. But
yeah,
on my little 5-inch screen, sometimes that's hard to pull up.
It is, and for me, you know, my first down and side imagings were Lowrance's Gen 1 HDSs, and they were both 5s. And so they were great for the down imaging, but the side imaging, I was like, yeah, man, I might have wasted some money here. So. Oh, one thing I want to put in there about speed. Generally, everybody will tell you down inside is about 3 to 5, but like I said, you can get away if you tweak your settings at a solid 2 miles an hour. You can get away with it at a 1. It's going to be a little fuzzy, but you can get away with it at a 1.
And what settings are you changing for that? Like ping rate and refresh rate, or
yeah,
that kind of thing?
Lowrance, it'll be ping rate. I think ping rate and refresh, or maybe ping rate and chart speed. In Humminbird, it is, I believe, just straight up chart speed. So you want to kind of match that chart speed. I keep it about a mile an hour under, what I might be going. So if I'm going to be graphing a lot of times 5 miles an hour, I'm going to run it at a 4 or 5. Up on the, for example, up on the trolling motor now, I'm going to really back that off. It's going to be, a 2 most of the time. So.
Okay. What do you think we should talk about next, Ryan?
So as far as structure goes, like, is there a way? I know you said that it's kind of hard to tell on sonar. I'm sure it's a lot easier on like down imaging and side imaging. But is there like certain characteristics you can kind of look for to kind of help with determining what's rocks, what's brush, what's weeds, and all that?
There is, and what you really want to pay attention to, and it's going to be really a combination. With 2D, you're going to pay a lot more attention to your map, because structure number one, you're going to want to find points or ditches or steep drops as opposed to less steep drops. So that first off, it's going to start with your map, and you're going to want to find that sort of stuff on your map that's going to stick out, and everybody's going to find it. Now, if you don't have a map, or a good map of the area, the good thing about it is most units now allow you to make maps. So definitely invest in whatever you have to do to make your own map of that area. The other thing is, even if you don't have that, pay attention to, because I know you fish a river a lot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So pay attention to, sharp drop-offs, sharp peaks, corners, points in there where a creek runs in, go over that, starting right in front of that creek. Learn your color palette. Become very, very intimate with your color palette. Get over a sandy bottom and see what that looks like, so that you know what a sandy or mucky bottom shows up on. Then get over some rocks and see what color that hard bottom shows up as. Then find you some grass. Most of the time grass, it's kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but it'll be, when it's first starting to come up, it'll be very jagged edges at the top. So, so spend the time learning that sort of stuff. And then, learn, in the rivers, learn where your shoals are, where your, like I said, where your channels, where other creeks intersect, where your bluffs are, where there might be jagged rocks. And you'll tell, once you learn what a hard bottom is, if you go over an area where there's, some riprap or something, or a rock slide, you'll see those just jagged up and down bottom areas. And then from there, I always tell people a wobble head is a great depth finder or feature finder, depth finder. Pick you up a 1/2 ounce, 3/4 ounce wobble head, throw it out there and feel feel it. 2D sonar, I can tell you that's all I had. There was a lot of times I would see stuff and go, well, I don't know what that is exactly, but let me see if I can get hung up in it and bring a piece back.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you got me interested in the whole thing with like making your map. I need to look more into that because my fish finder, it's only like $120 fish finder.
Yeah.
It has GPS and allows you to make waypoints, but there's not an actual map. I think it's just like if I remember correctly, it's just like yellow or white background, and it's got you on there, and you just hit a button that puts a little waypoint on there.
Gotcha.
I know mine can do the mapping too, but do you usually have to have like a bigger SD card to do that, or how does that work, or
Well, I don't know how it works with Lowrance, because that was kind of after I kind of moved away from Lowrance and went with Humminbird. They kind of brought that in. That was one of the reasons why I went with Humminbird when I decided to upgrade from my 5s, Lowrance 5s back in the day.
Because Humminbird, a lot of their models have like lake maps already built in there, don't they?
They have some, but most of the time you're needing something like their lake maps. Like Lowrance finally come out with their own, which is CMap, which up until they came out with CMap, like I used Navionics forever. Well, when I moved to Humminbird, Humminbird has LakeMaster, and I've heard nothing but good things about LakeMaster. But again, the problem for me with LakeMaster up until this year, and I'm happy about it, is that they didn't have a couple of my home lakes. So, they really didn't do me any good. So I just kept using Navionics. Still use Navionics on my front graph.
Talking about Secret Lake, what is it? Secret Lake P? Is that what it is?
P. I got Secret Lake P and S, and don't even get me started on that. I had a guy comment today, and he kind of ticked me off, but I'll explain that in a little bit. It's not a big deal, but as far as the maps go, now they have, I think it's like 15 hours of recording built into their units. Humminbird does, and the other guys, or you have to buy what's called a 0.1, or not a 0.1, a zero line card, and then it's got a ton of ability, a ton of hours to map. Like I've got a couple of those small lakes, Top Secret Lake P that you're talking about there. It didn't have any maps, but I got that whole lake map now, so and haven't run out of space yet. So you might have to look into that. I know, again, if you're using Navionics, they have a mapping tool that kind of goes with their web app that you can use. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it.
Yeah, I've got that on my phone, but since I've got the fish finder, I don't tend to look at it as much. I should probably look on there more. And what I really need to do is waypoints that other people done marked on there. I need to go along and mark those on my fish finder.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, it's a handy tool to have. It's a really handy tool to have,
especially if you don't have a fish finder.
Yes. Yeah. I actually, before I was able to afford to get 2 graphs that I could use my maps on, I actually bought them from Ram Mount. There was a cell phone mount, and I mounted it to my dash so I could actually use my Navionics on it and use my graph. So it worked good.
We did that in my father-in-law's bass boat. We went down to the inlet down at the beach, and his fish finder was ancient. So I just put my phone up on the dash and put the Navionics app on, and we were crisscrossing the channels, picking up flounder. So
there you go.
It definitely works.
Map study is where it starts. I mean, even if you've got the nicest unit or 10 units, map study is where it starts. It's got to start with map study. You've got to know the contour of the lake or river or whatever you're fishing. And like I said, back in the day, when all I had was the little black and white, eagle, I'd get out there on my John boat and I'd just crisscross and just almost try to commit to memory where features were. And I mean, I'd spend hours a day. And that's the big thing. We all want to go fishing, but sometimes, you're paying money for these tools that are going to help you. Sometimes you gotta leave that fishing rod strapped down or leave it in its holder and spend your time staring at that screen all day.
That definitely takes some discipline.
It does. Yeah. It does.
Maybe just leave the fishing pole at home. That way you don't have the temptation.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Can you think of any common mistakes you see people make with fish finders, or misconceptions, or things they do wrong when they set them up?
Not really on setup. There's some things that like Humminbird, and Lowrance does too, that they don't necessarily always tell you. I hear a lot of guys getting interference in their trolling motor. Well, one of the things that Humminbird don't tell you is that, if you're buying a unit to mount on your trolling motor, they've got a skimmer. That skimmer is not insulated for that magnetic, so you get interference, especially as it's in the water more, it gets older, it gets worse. So they've got a program where you can actually trade that skimmer in and get a trolling motor transducer, which is insulated and actually designed to be on your trolling motors. Now I know that doesn't necessarily, relate to kayaks. Of course, we were talking about the Ultrex now.
It's coming.
Yeah. So, that's really it. And as far as the biggest mistake I see people make is what we just said. They go out and they spend the money on this and they don't spend the seat time learning how to use these units. So, if you're not gonna spend the seat time, buy more baits, buy more rods, but don't buy them and just have it be a paperweight. It's going to make you better if you put the time into it.
Well, one thing you got me thinking about is I'm planning on getting a pedal drive kayak, and the one that I'm getting, there's a scupper hole specifically for a transducer, and it goes down and it's got like a protective plate, and I believe it's kind of outside the kayak so you can do the side imaging and down imaging and all that, but it's right under the seat, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And with that pedal drive being up there, you said you don't want any interference in front of it, so I'm wondering how that's going to work with that propeller being, a foot and a half away from where that transducer is.
And I would say probably not much, because we're talking about the difference a lot of times between a trolling motor, and you're probably getting a couple more RPMs out of that, or even a lot of times the bottom of the boat, because the bottom of a bass boat I know the bottom of my Triton has got so many different levels, it's just stinking ridiculous, and trying to find the best place to put it on. That in boats, that is one of the most asked questions I get. Where's the best place to put it? Now, if those guys have already designed it into the hole, I'd say they've very well tested and vetted. If not, then take it back to them and say, look, you guys need to fix this. You really stunk that one up. You obviously didn't try that out before you sent it out.
Yeah, I guess it don't matter to me too much right now since I don't have the side imaging and down imaging, but eventually I'm sure I will, make that investment. So
it was interesting on my kayak. It's the same thing. I have a Hobie, and I have the triple shot transducer, and it does go pretty much a foot behind where the pedal drive is. So on my Jackson Coosa, the scupper hole spot for the transducer was too small for the triple shot, because that's a pretty big transducer. So I ended up having an arm that went off the side, but I could never get that arm to stay tight enough that it didn't move as I paddled. So I had distortion just from the arm moving when I paddled. So I'm sure there's Yeah, I think having it, I haven't noticed any image issues on mine. So.
Well, and you got to remember, the blade, what's that transducer sticking out? Probably 3/4 of an inch, maybe an inch, right? So
Right.
the blades of that pedal are probably 2 to 3 inches, maybe below that. So the turbulence really is coming underneath. You're still getting pretty well clean water, across the face of that. So
That makes sense.
You're really not, it might go through a little bit of turbulence down below it, but that's by the time that comes back, it's already kind of filled in the gaps. So I don't think it'd cause any problems with that. Now you stick it behind a 200 horsepower and you might have an issue.
Yeah, we ain't got kayaks that advanced yet.
I don't know, man. I've seen some videos where they've stuck big motors on down in Florida, and I'm just like, that'd be fun, but I don't want to die.
Hey, they're getting crazy. It's really interesting where kayaks are going.
Yeah.
And we're still young in this sport, so just imagine like 10 years from now,
Yeah. Like what was it I seen somebody put on a kayak? It was one of the Sea-Doo, propulsion
Oh,
jet.
wow.
Oh my God. I was like, wow. That's insane.
Oh man, you would flip. There's no way you wouldn't flip trying to do that.
I know. It's crazy.
Huh.
Well, Sean, you got any more questions you want to ask Hank here?
I think we covered it. I mean, the biggest thing for me was always when I see the fish, how do I turn around and cast to them? But I think if I'm going to pick up some buoys and try that waypoint thing, and I think that will help a lot, because then I'll have a visual representation of it in front of me, and I think that's going to be a big help. So
it helps, and as you get better at doing that and more confidence, built, you'll use those buoys less and less.
Right.
Well, is there anything we didn't ask that you feel like needs to be touched on?
No, man, I think we covered everything pretty well as far as the beginners. I mean, we can go down plenty of rabbit holes when we talk about this stuff. I mean,
I bet, especially with you.
You can really get into some, when you start talking about frequencies and angles, and I mean, it can get pretty mind numbing for me, and I really like the stuff. So, I try to keep that stuff away,
Well, let's call this one Fish Finders for Beginners, and the next one will be Fish Finders for Experts.
There we go. I'm not going to take the moniker of it.
All right. Well, appreciate you coming back on here and hanging out with us. Always a pleasure. You want to take a minute, plug yourself, your YouTube and sponsors and all that good stuff?
Guys, the biggest thing for me is, just come over. Even if you're a kayaker, I do a lot of my settings for graphs. I do a lot of fishing videos, but I like to keep my fishing videos around decision making. And let's face it, what is fishing but decision making? I want to show you, for right or wrong, the decision making I go throughout the day. And I share with you whether I'm successful or not. And, for me, sometimes you learn as much from my failures. I don't like being the YouTube guy that shows you just me going out and catching 3-pounders and 4-pounders, because I don't think that does beginners justice. I think that really frustrates beginners when they go out and see YouTubers or professional anglers saying, well, you go do this and this and this and this. There's always exceptions to every single rule. I want to show you, the video that the last fishing video that I put out was, I was fishing spawning bass. I lost 2 4-pounders. The video could have been great. I still caught but I showed that. And what was I doing wrong? I was too close. I was fishing spinning gear, which I'd been fishing big Alabama rigs and just horsing fish before that. And mentally, I didn't adjust. I tried to horse those 2 4-pound smallmouths off the bed, and let me tell you, they don't give up. And you know, I want to show people the good and the bad. You know, at one point in time, I was, you know, messing around and set the hook and knocked my own hat off my head. You know, but I want to show people, you know, the truth about fishing. But I also want to, you know, tell people and show people through those videos, you know, really how to go out there and break those bodies of water down and find those fish and be able to do it quick and fast. And that's what I want BassGeek to be about. I want BassGeek to be able to show you that we don't all catch them like Bill Dance, you know, and you know, I don't want my channel to frustrate, you know, the beginners, because, you know, you go look at the MLFs and there's always guys that ain't caught them. You know, the difference is between them and us is, you know, they don't have a camera boat when they're stinking it up, or a camera in the boat. My camera's always in the boat. So you're going to see the good, you're going to see the bad. And that's what I want to bring you, is the God's honest truth about fishing. And, you know, I've been fishing for probably 36 years. So, you know, I don't know a lot, but I know 1 or 2 things that I might be able to help you out with. So anyway, BassGeek on YouTube, BassGeek Fishing on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever. I think that's it. Twitter, you know, I think that's all I got. I'm not doing the TikTok, hiccup, whatever. I don't know what it's called. So,
you got any sponsors you want to shout out?
Yeah, you know, I'd like to give a shout out to, you know, Ledge Head Lures, Bass Munitions, TRC Covers, Connect Scale, who eventually I plan on doing some online tournaments with. You know, hopefully, I've been saying that for years, but you know, hopefully we're going to get some guys doing some online tournaments. You know, Lose, and Ego Fishing Products. They make the nets and the cold boards and all that stuff. And I know I'm leaving people out, but I'm going to take a sip of Coke like a NASCAR driver and go on my merry way. So, no. So if I left anybody out, I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, man, like I said, appreciate you coming back on here and going over that. You know, that's a lot of information. This is going to be a really good episode, because, you know, that's what we like here. We're trying to learn. Absolutely. But as far as online tournaments, by the time this comes out, you know, I'll already have fished in the Paddle and Fin Spring Madness bracket tournament.
I've seen that posted. That's a pretty interesting little tournament.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm fishing Sunday, the day before this comes out. So yeah, hopefully I've won.
Good luck.
And it's not looking good. It's looking like thunderstorms in the morning. So I might die. But
don't do that.
Yeah.
PDF. Ain't that right?
But yeah,
PFD, not PDF.
Yeah.
Oh, shoo! It's been a long day.
But there are several more for several weeks going on, so make sure you're checking that out every Sunday. On the Paddle and Fin Facebook page, we'll be live streaming the different rounds. The Noob tournament, the Noob monthly tournament, it is on Tourney X. So if you're wanting to kind of get that feel for the kayak tournament, sign up for that. It's $10. There's cool prizes. First, it's really going to depend on how many people sign up for how many places are win prizes. But first place is definitely going to be a custom catch board with your name and all that on. So that's going to be awesome. So make sure you sign up for that if you're interested. Anything left out?
I think that's pretty good. That covers pretty much everything. I'm looking forward to the live stuff too. We're talking about, putting everything out there, good and bad. Well, it's all going to be shown on our Facebook Live. So tune in and check it out.
Nice.
I'm sure I'm going to be casting into a few trees on there at least once or twice.
Yeah, I set the hook on a really good tree pounder the other day.
I'm pretty good at catching some tree bass myself.
Yeah. Every once in a while, I like to fish for the squirrels.
You ever had one bite?
No, but I have had them throw things at me before. God's honest truth.
All right, so.
All right.
So.
We'll finish it out. Our catchphrase, it's Bass Fishing for Noobs. We're bringing you the techniques, the tricks, and the tips to help you rip more lips. Thanks, guys, and I'll catch us later.
Later, guys.